Do you believe in miracles? Because we all just witnessed one on Saturday at noon. Michigan pulls off the upset of the century, the biggest upset in the history of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, the game. But rest assured, Ohio State fans, the night is often darkest before a new day arrives. Hello and welcome to the JSA Studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with a reaction to the final week of the regular season for the Big Ten. But before we get into the video proper, I am going to take this time to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by starting with a brand new tier, the Megan Fox tier. And the sole inhabitant of the Megan Fox tier is the University of Michigan. Why is it called the Megan Fox tier? Well, much like the Scarlett Johansson tier, which we'll get to next, this team looked pretty. And as someone who was 10 years old and watched Transformers 1 in theaters the week it came out, I think Megan Fox is an icon. Nevertheless, moving on from whatever the fuck that was, for the fourth year in a row, the JSA Nathan curse / reverse psychology jinx has worked its magic. For the fourth year in a row, I have predicted Ohio State to beat Michigan, and for the fourth year in a row, Michigan has beaten Ohio State. So you can go ahead and thank me. I am the sole reason Michigan won the game. It is because I predicted Ohio State to win. No, in all seriousness, this was a miracle on ice level upset, and I did not see it coming. If you had told me that they had kept it close because the weather was a factor, the offensive line was a factor, Ohio State couldn't push the ball down the field, I would have believed you. But I also would have said, Ohio State's probably just going to win the game. And I was not alone in that opinion. Practically no one gave Michigan a chance to win this game. I believe FPI gave Michigan a 5% chance to win the game. It was the same odds as a 15 seed upsetting a 2 seed in the NCAA basketball tournament. If Michigan and Ohio State played this game 100 times, Michigan probably wins 4 or 5 of them. But they didn't play the game 100 times. They played the game 1 time, and Michigan won. A while back on this channel, one of my better videos that I've ever made, in my own opinion, was titled Doing Less with More. More obviously having 2 O's, where I ripped into the coaching staff and the trajectory of the University of Michigan, none of which was unreasonable at the time, and I still stand by everything that I said. However, in that video, I stated that I was out on the Sharon Moore era at the University of Michigan. But I gave a pathway for me to be back in. And I said, you got to do 2 of these 3 things. You've got to beat Indiana, you've got to beat Ohio State, and you've got to get Bryce Underwood to commit to the team. And Michigan didn't beat Indiana, although they arguably could have. But they sure as shit got Bryce Underwood to commit. I understand that he's still not signed. We'll see that hopefully on Wednesday. But you also beat Ohio State. So now I'm back in. And before you call me a flip-flopper or a fake fan or whatever the fuck, no, I don't care. You can say whatever you want to. But I'm going to state my opinions, and I am not going to be afraid to change them given new information, because that's what reasonable people do. When provided new information that changes the context in which you have an opinion, your opinion ought to change. So if you want to bash me for not being a blind loyalist, go for it. I don't care. However, I would like to state this emphatically, okay? I picked Ohio State hoping that Michigan would win because I picked Ohio State. That was something I legitimately tried to reverse psychology / jinx myself into getting Michigan the W. And guess what? It fucking worked. So if you ever see me predicting Michigan to beat Ohio State in a football game, just know Judgment Day is coming. Jesus is about to part the skies and descend from the heavens and take all those that are worthy up with him. Or at least I think that's what happened. I haven't read Revelations or whatever the last book in the Bible is. I'm not sure. I think it's Revelations. Nevertheless, we'll get all of my posturing and shit out of the way now. Let's actually sit down and talk about the game. Because I want to say a few things from the Michigan perspective here. And then at the end of the video, we're going to circle back around and talk about Ohio State and the game from the Ohio State perspective. Because I don't think a lot of people are being honest about what happened on Saturday. From the Michigan perspective, this is an emphatic win. This is something that even in all of the years that Ohio State beat us, where they went, I think it was an 8-game winning streak before 2011, and then a 7-game winning streak after 2011, or maybe it was reversed. Maybe it was 7 beforehand and 8 after. I don't remember. But I'm pretty sure they won 15 out of 16. And that was my life growing up. When I was growing up, Michigan didn't beat Ohio State. Now we're 4 years in a row. However, one thing that I can say about all of the Michigan teams that lost to Ohio State in that 15 out of 16 year run is that Ohio State was probably the better team for all of those games. I can think of maybe 1 or 2 examples where that might not have been the case. 2006, although I would still probably argue that Ohio State was a better team that year, but it was very, very close. And then not 2018. I know a lot of you are going to say 2018 and want me to talk about 2018. I don't think Michigan was a better football team in 2018. I think Ohio State was. I think Michigan was a better football team in 2016 by a relatively significant margin. But those are really the only 2 examples that I can think of. I was way too young to know anything really before 2006. As I've said on this channel beforehand, my first memory of football is watching Michigan lose to Ohio State in that 2006 1-versus-2 matchup game. But this game today was really the first time where a clearly inferior opponent has upset the rival team since I've been alive. I was born in 1997, okay? So if you want to talk about 96 or 95 or whatever, 94 I think was also a year where Michigan upset a highly ranked Ohio State team. Go for it. I wasn't alive, okay? But even in those games, I don't think Michigan was as bad as they have been this year. Now, Michigan, honestly, coming out of that bye week, did kind of look like a different team defensively. Yeah, they gave up 38 to Oregon. Oregon's got an elite level offense. I don't really care that they were specifically able to exploit Michigan's weaknesses in the secondary, okay? I get it. I understand why it happened. Oregon is the only undefeated team in the country, and if I'm being honest with you, I think they are the best team in the country. Whether or not they win the national championship is a different discussion. But Michigan, on the defensive side of the ball, was a different team after that first bye week, where they came out and they held an Illinois offense that is actually quite good statistically, and when you just watch them, that's a good offense, to, I believe, 20 points or something like that. Then they held Michigan State to 17. Again, that's an offense that can put up points when they're running well. And then, obviously, the magnum opus for Wink Martindale this past Saturday against Ohio State. And I do want to talk about Ryan Day's game plan. If you're interested in hearing that, I will be talking about it in the Ohio State section of this video at the end. But as far as Michigan's game plan goes defensively and offensively, I really think that it was about as good as they were going to get this year, okay? The fact of the matter is that when you have Davis Warren at quarterback, there's just not a whole lot you're going to be able to do offensively. There just isn't. Now, if Colston Loveland had been healthy, you would have been able to scheme up some looks, and Colston Loveland will beat anybody pretty much in a one-on-one situation in college football. So you can scheme up some looks to get him open, and then you can get a passing game going off of that, where the second read is to a Tyler Morris, who's actually, I think, a quality receiver that has been left down by the quarterback play, or a Kendrick Bell, or whoever, okay? All of that being said, the offensive line looked different today, okay? And Is that largely just because they got up to play Ohio State? Yes. Is that an area that has to improve going into next year? Also, yes. However, one player in particular along that offensive line that I would like to give a shout out by name, and that's Evan Link. Evan Link, I thought, played tremendously in this game. And this is someone who was awful at the beginning of the year, was getting abused left and right, and was just not playing at a very high level. However, much credit to him and much credit to Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore and anybody else who helped him out throughout the year. He is a different player now than he was beforehand. He was also really good against Northwestern. And before the bye week against Indiana, he was also really good. He wasn't great like he was against Ohio State this past week. However, that is someone where now I'm thinking, hey, maybe offensive tackle isn't as big of a necessity in the portal as it was a few weeks ago, a month and a half ago, so to speak, because he has improved dramatically. Now, I can't really say that about anybody else on the offensive line. However, nobody else on the offensive line was ever as bad as Evan Link was either, okay? In the game on Saturday, the offensive line did its job. It got just enough push consistently to be able to move the ball in the run game effectively. Now, were they great? No. Are they as good as the past 3 years? No. Are they even as good as some of the early Michigan teams in the Jim Harbaugh era offensive lines that weren't that great but were still pretty good? No. I think this is a defiantly average offensive line right now. However, at the beginning of the year, it was basically the biggest liability on the team. That is no longer the case, okay? They have done a very, very good job at addressing the offensive line play. And it has gotten better from week 1 and week 2 in Texas, when you can really see a lot of the problems because Fresno State didn't have the talent to exploit a lot of the problems that Michigan's offensive line had, to these last 2 weeks here. You can really see the growth if you go back and look at the early season film and then the late season film. So does that give you hope going forward? Yes, or at least it should, okay? Okay, let's move on to the defense now. Defensively, Wink Martindale has made the adjustments that he has thus far refused to make in previous employments as a defensive coordinator. And what do I mean by that? Part of the reason why Wink Martindale got fired from Baltimore, I believe in 2022, I think he got fired, and then Mike McDonald took over as the defensive coordinator after his 1-year pit stop at Michigan. Part of the reason he got fired was because he wouldn't adjust his scheme to the personnel that he had. And then that was also a major problem during his 2-year stretch as the defensive coordinator for the Giants. Okay? He wouldn't adjust his scheme. He would say, you guys are NFL players. You ought to be able to do what I'm asking you to do. And that was a major reason why he, in all honesty, kind of got ran out of the defensive coordinator scene in the NFL. However, this year, and I'm going to give him full credit for this, he got off of what he wanted to do because they were getting exposed so effectively and just to almost an embarrassing level most of the time. Any team that had a competent offensive line that could pick up a blitz was picking apart our secondary early on in the season. And now all of a sudden you look at these last 2 weeks, he's not blitzing nearly as much as he was before. He's not running man-to-man coverage as much as he was before. He's running a lot more zone, and he's running a lot more off-zone and off-man coverage if he is running man coverage and blitzing. Now, at his heart, I still believe Wink Martindale wants to be a heavy blitz sort of defensive coordinator. However, that doesn't necessarily work as effectively in the college level because there is such a thing as a difference in talent level. In the NFL, the talent from the 53rd guy on the roster to the first guy is not that great. Like, we're talking about a 99.39th percentile athleticism to a 99.59 percentile athleticism, okay? Like, that's the difference between the athletes in the NFL. In college football, you could get like a 50th percentile athlete lining up against a 100th percentile athlete, okay? So a lot of the times, the scheme isn't as important as the players. So the X's and O's aren't as important as the Jimmies and Joes, so to say. However, a lot of the time, when you have that equal level of talent, and this is the same thing that happened to Don Brown, which is why the comparisons weren't necessarily out of left field, okay? When the talent level became equal, the X's and O's weren't there to protect the Jimmies and Joes. And Wink Martindale, by the end of this season here, has proved to me that he has been able to take a step back, look in the mirror, and self-edit, and realize I don't need to blitz to create pressure. I can keep 8 people in coverage or 7 people in coverage. I don't need to bring that 5th or 6th extra rusher because I can get pressure with 4 or 3 down linemen consistently because I have potentially 4 first-round picks along the defensive line. Because basically any quarterback that could recognize a blitz coming would be able to take advantage of you blitzing. And that's what we saw most notably in the USC game. But again, all credit to Wink Martindale here. He's gotten a lot of people off his back the past few weeks, myself included. He's done a really, really, really good job since that first bye week. He looked in the mirror. He said, okay, I can't run the scheme that I want to run. Let's figure out what works. And he figured out what works. And this defense is, if they keep playing like they have been the past few weeks, a top 15, maybe even top 10 unit in all of college football. Now, for the bowl game, I don't know, because I highly doubt we're going to see about half of the starting defense. I think they're probably going to opt out. But the last thing I want to say about Michigan before we move on to, I know I said earlier the Scarlett Johansson tier was next. It's not. The treading water tier is next. So before we move on to that, there's one last thing I want to talk about. But so many other people have already talked about it, so I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on it. And that is the decision to move Zeke Berry to outside corner, where he played really, really good this past week, and then to move Makari Page to the nickel position, where he had the best game of his career at Michigan. He has given a lot of NFL scouts something to look at by doing that. Because Makari Page could be that 3rd or 4th safety that can come in and play any role you want him to at least a level where he won't be a liability, on top of offering some great special teams upside at the next level. I think Makari Page is starting to work himself back into being that middle of day 3 kind of conversation that he was entering this year. Kind of like a 5th, 6th, maybe if he's lucky, 4th round pick sort of player. A lot will depend upon the combine numbers and athleticism and stuff like that. Also, this is a weaker draft class this year, not to get off of topic too much, but that was a brilliant decision. I don't know who made that decision. It could have been Lamar Morgan. It could have been Sharon Moore. It could have been Wink Martindale. It could have been anybody. I don't know who made that suggestion, but moving Makari Page into the nickel was the best decision that this coaching staff has made this year. And honestly, the past few weeks, they've made a lot of good decisions. Anyway, 20 minutes of Michigan talk out of the way here. Moving on to the treading water tier. There are 6 teams in the treading water tier this week. Oregon, Indiana, UCLA, Washington, Maryland, and USC. So for Oregon and Washington, they played each other. I didn't really expect this to be a close game. It wasn't a close game. Oregon handled business. They get to come to Indianapolis. They're going to play Penn State. And that'll be a very, very fun matchup to talk about. We'll get to that on Friday, okay? Washington, this was a year where you exceeded expectations. I don't think a lot of people, myself included, expected you to make a bowl game this year. I think Jed Fish is the correct coach for you. I think he fits what the Big Ten Conference is to a T, and I think he's going to get this program headed in the correct direction here very quickly. However, he's going to probably need at least another 2, maybe 3 years to get to the point where he could really start competing with the upper echelon of the Big Ten. Indiana, you destroyed Purdue. They're awful. They fired their head coach the next day. You did exactly what you needed to do. With Miami losing, you are now a virtual lock to make the college football playoff. This is a very, very, very good team that's going to have an opportunity to play maybe Tennessee in Knoxville, maybe somebody else, could be someone else, we don't know yet, but you've done everything that you possibly could to get into the playoffs. This is a very, very good team that may or may not, depending upon the matchup, win a playoff game. Maryland, you're awful. We all knew this. The real question is, as of the time that I'm recording this, 11:30 p.m. Sunday night, you have not fired Mike Locksley. Now, generally speaking, I would be willing to give him another year, especially with a very, very talented top 50 player coming in at the quarterback position. I think he's a good head coach. I think he's a great fit for the area when it comes to a recruiting perspective. And generally, I just think he's a really good coach. Now, whether or not you end up keeping him right now, it really looks like you're going to end up keeping him. This year was still disappointing. Again, I get that the expectations weren't high, but the expectation should always be to at least get to a bowl game, unless there are some serious mitigating circumstances, like the next team we're going to talk about, UCLA. UCLA was not in a position to win 5 games this year. Genuinely. They had nobody at the quarterback position. They had no talent basically anywhere, as far as I was concerned. I thought that they would struggle to get to 5 or 6 wins if they were in the Mountain West. Okay? That is very clearly not the case. You've got yourself your coach in Deshaun Foster. He is the guy that has a very good chance to revitalize UCLA into a consistent football team. Are they going to get to the level of an Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Indiana type of school? At least this season, Indiana? Probably not, but this very well could be in Iowa or in Illinois or a Minnesota type of team where pretty much no matter what happens, they're going to end up winning 7 to 9 games. And maybe once every 3 or 4 years, they can put together a team that can get to that 10-2 or maybe even 11-1 sort of position. But I can say definitively that I believe in the direction this program is heading, which is not something I can say about my final team here in the treading water tier, USC. Okay? I fully expected you to be better than you have been the past few weeks. This is a major rivalry game. You really want to beat Notre Dame. I get it. I understand all of that. The offense looked pretty good. Whether or not this quarterback is going to end up being the guy next year, you've got this highly touted 5-star kid coming in. You might go to him. You might go to the transfer portal. I don't know. I'm not particularly sure what that's going to look like right now. But this team has got to get better. And I think that Lincoln Riley is going to be better. I believe he's going to turn it around. Next year, the goal should be 8-4 or 9-3. Because the way that you should be looking at this is that this isn't year, 4 of Lincoln Riley heading into this next year. It'd be year 4, I think. It's not year 4, it's year 2 of a rebuild. Okay? That's what I think you need to look at this as. And there's a very, very good possibility that they're going to come out in a Big Ten that is wide open next year and be a high-quality football team. Are they going to get to 9, 10, 11 wins? I mean, maybe, but I would lean towards no. I still think they're too far away on the defensive side of the ball. Next group of teams up the Scarlett Johansson tier, we have Rutgers, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Penn State. We're going to work from left to right here, just like we did beforehand, starting with Rutgers. Rutgers had a very, very convincing win this past week. They flat out and straight up dominated Michigan State on the road. This is a high-quality team that is going to have the opportunity to get to 8 wins. I think right now they are being mocked to the Quick Lane Bowl, I believe is called. It's the game where they will play the MAC runner-up at Ford Field. So could be an 8th win on the horizon for them. I believe that would be back-to-back seasons of 8 wins, which would just be incredible for this program. Greg Schiano is doing a phenomenal job up there in New Jersey. Minnesota, obviously, you're maybe 3 plays away from a 10-win season. UNC, Michigan, Penn State, all games that you could have won had you gotten one more break here or there at any point in the game. So this was a team that was very, very close to getting to 10-2 and potentially having an outside shot at the playoffs. 10-2 in the Big Ten, and you're not a name brand, probably not, but maybe with a victory over Penn State and Michigan, who beat Ohio State, I don't know. Nevertheless, you dominated your biggest rival, Wisconsin, this week, and we'll talk about Wisconsin coming up here. But you win your rivalry games. That is important. PJ Fleck is doing a very, very, very good job up there in Minnesota. Moving on, Iowa, a game, again, that I thought you would win. I thought you would beat Nebraska. You should have beat them. You were a better team. However, you don't have anything in the passing game. Watching that game was funny to me because you had effectively Caleb Johnson and nothing else on offense. And you were very, very good defensively, much better than you have been for the majority of this season. Now, part of that, I think, is who you were playing. Nebraska is probably several years away from having that high-powered offense that they think they're going to have. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get there this offseason with the transfer portal and the fact that they're going to be at best 8th or 9th in terms of money being able to spend in the transfer portal. So I don't really know what the future of that looks like for Nebraska. But as far as you're concerned, you've got Sullivan coming back next year. If you can find a replacement running back, this could be a dangerous team heading into next season because I do think the defense is going to get better. You're not losing a whole lot. Again, you are losing some pieces, potentially Castro and Jay Higgins as well. But all in all, I do believe you will be able to reload on defense, and I actually think there's a possibility it could be better than it was this season. So next year, again, the Big Ten is wide open next year. This could be a dark horse team. Illinois, this season went just about as good as you possibly could have wanted it to go. The only thing that you could look at is, oh man, if we could have gotten one more player, one more break against Minnesota, we could have had a real chance to end up 10-2 in the regular season. And yes, that's true, but you were never going to beat Oregon, and you were probably never going to beat Penn State either. So 10-2 was the ceiling. And going 9-3 is really good. This was a great year for you. You're going to have the opportunity to play what is likely going to be, in my opinion, Ole Miss in the Citrus Bowl, which you'll almost certainly get. It depends upon who wants who in the Outback Bowl. I imagine the Outback Bowl will take South Carolina over Ole Miss. I think South Carolina will be a bigger draw, so I believe that will regulate Ole Miss into the Citrus Bowl versus you guys. There's a definitive possibility that 90% of Ole Miss's team is going to opt out of the bowl game, so we don't know what that team's going to look like. If you guys can convince your team to stick around, you have an opportunity to get to that 10-win mark, which would be a big, big deal for this program. And, of course, the glimmer in my eye, the darling of my heart, Penn State, the second biggest winner of the weekend, dominating Maryland and securing a spot in the Big Ten championship game for the first time since 2016. That could be a game where narratives change. Now, me personally, I think Oregon's going to win, but you've certainly got the opportunity. You certainly have a chance to win. This is still a high-quality football team. I don't think they're as good as they were last year, but This is a very, very good football team that I think has a chance to host a team like potentially Alabama or maybe Indiana even in the playoffs. Either case, I think you would win that game, whether it would be against Indiana. That would be very, very fun, but you'd never want to see two Big Ten teams matched up into playoffs. Anyway, all in all, this has been a fantastic season for you. There was nobody that benefited more from the reworking of the way the Big Ten did schedules and the going away of divisions than Penn State, because now you don't have to play Michigan every year. You don't have to play Ohio State every year, and you don't have to play Oregon every year. In fact, there's a definitive possibility you won't play any of those three teams going forward, at least in one season. Now, next year, you do play Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. However, going forward, it would not shock me if you ended up dodging at least 3 of the 4 bullets in the Big Ten, which is what you did this year. So, all in all, this is going to be a very, very well-remembered season for Penn State. And now that we're done with the positives, we have to get into the negatives. This is the ass tier because these teams played like ass. Purdue, self-explanatory. Wisconsin, self-explanatory. Michigan State, self-explanatory. Northwestern, self-explanatory. They all got their asses beat. Nebraska, though, does need a little bit of talking about, because this is a team that has gotten very, very close a few times. If Dylan Raiola doesn't miss a wide-open touchdown, there's a very real possibility you beat Illinois. They had the opportunity to pull off a major upset against Ohio State. They had the opportunity to beat Iowa this year. If those things go your way, all of a sudden you're not 6-6, you're 9-3. And that is a different animal than being 6-6 and sneaking into a bowl game. Okay? So this is a interesting situation to be in, because obviously you're in a better spot than you were in year 1 under Matt Rule with Dylan Raiola. Next year, we're going to have to see what you do in the transfer portal, specifically at the wide receiver position. Now, today, there's been a lot of movement at the wide receiver position with a ton of players entering the transfer portal that are really, really, really good. So, yeah, you could go out and get maybe 1 or 2 of them, get Dylan Raiola some actual separators at the position, some playmakers there, and all of a sudden you could be cooking with gas next year. We got to do it, though. You got to do it. We got to see it happen before I can talk about this being a team that is headed with an upward trajectory. When it comes to Iowa, you lost to an Iowa team that is incapable of throwing a forward pass. And yes, Caleb Johnson's very, very good. Okay, I get it. I understand that. Defense played out of its mind, so I'm not putting the loss on Dylan Raiola's shoulders. However, he did fumble the ball away at the end of the game. Okay, and Dylan Raiola has kind of been a lot of the reasons why you were struggling this year. I think especially the defense was kind of put in a lot of bad situations by the inexperience on offense. Now, that's kind of the point in year 2 with year 1 true freshman number 1 overall recruit quarterback type. Okay? I get it. I understand it. It's growing pains. This year, the goal was to get to a bowl game. And if that was 9-3 or 6-6, that doesn't matter. So you met the expectations for this year, although just barely. And finally, we have the super ass tier with Ohio State in sole possession of this tier here. Obviously, there's a lot to be angry about, okay? And I feel like if you're an Ohio State fan that skipped to this part of the video from the beginning of the video or stuck through the whole video, first off, thank you for watching. Second off, I feel the need to clear the air here, okay? I am a Michigan fan. I live in Michigan, 15 minutes from Ann Arbor. Okay, I was born in the University of Michigan hospital. I bleed blue, okay? I will not, in this video or at any other point in time, say anything biasedly. This is my opinion. This is my honest opinion. And if Michigan was in this situation, I would be saying the same shit. Okay? If you want to call me biased or whatever, no, I'm not going to take that because you're lying. Okay? I'm not being biased when I'm saying the things that I'm going to say. And I'm going to say some shit that you don't like. And that's the reason why I wanted to preface this by saying, I'm saying this because I believe I'm correct. It's my opinion, okay? I'm not saying this because I'm a Michigan fan, okay? I'm saying this because I believe it is the correct course of action. And what that action is keeping Ryan Day as your head coach. Okay, there are a plethora of reasons why to keep him that aren't about the coaching in this game, which we're going to get to, okay? The outside reasons, of which there are a few, the most important is the almost $40 million buyout that you'll have to pay him, okay? And again, say what you want to, several insiders, not only for Michigan, but also for Ohio State, have said that the boosters and the athletic director do not have the appetite to pay $40 million in a buyout, okay? So I think that's the biggest reason why Ryan Day is not going to get fired, okay? The second biggest reason why I don't think Ryan Day is going to get fired is because he is legitimately a top 5 coach in college football right now. And there are 130 Division I college football teams that will fire their head coach and hire him on the spot. Really, you could argue Michigan, Alabama, and Texas are the only spots where they wouldn't immediately fire their coach to have Ryan Day coach their team. And that's because he is an elite caliber football coach. Genuinely. I believe that. I think he's really, really good. However, in this game, he fell into a trap. A trap that several other teams have also fallen into when it comes to playing the University of Michigan. For whatever reason, so many teams, Texas, USC, Minnesota, although they did it better than everybody else, have all fell into this trap alongside you of, for whatever reason, despite having statistically a top 15 run defense in college football, we're going to smash mouth the ball right up the middle at 2 first-round picks at the defensive tackle position. And that's not what you want to see happen, okay? I get it. I get that the play calling wasn't great. First off, Ryan Day isn't calling plays, Chip Kelly is. Second off, you are not alone in this blunder, okay? USC most notably. If USC dropbacks and throws the ball 60 times against Michigan, they beat Michigan 45-21. Like, it's a blowout, okay? If Minnesota throws the ball more efficiently, or at least has a quarterback that is of a higher level than Brosmer, he's been playing good. He's fine, okay? I'm not saying that he's a bad quarterback by any means. But had a bigger time athlete or player at that position, they beat Michigan easily, okay? And as much as this might be hard to hear, I have talked about this at length in the offseason heading into this season, that Will Howard was not a clear upgrade over Kyle McCord, okay? I'm going to link the video right here, all right? So you can go and look at that video where I break it down, okay? This was not a position where you clearly got better. Was not the quarterback spot. Genuinely. 100%. I made that argument consistently throughout the offseason and into this season, okay? Where you got better was the offensive line, which unfortunately your 2 best players got hurt and are done. But you definitely got better along the offensive line this year to last year, and you got better at the running back position as well. And even though I thought the defense was still going to be elite, I also talked about how it wasn't going to be as good as it was last year. And yes, I get that statistically when you look at the rankings, they're better than they were last year. But no, this is not a better defense than it was last year. Your defense was like 1% worse than Michigan's defense last year, and Michigan might have had the best defense in the history of college football last year, okay? Genuinely in elite all-time defense is what the 2023 Ohio State Buckeyes were. And Isaiah Hull got a lot of shit for saying stuff that I've also kind of been saying or alluding to. I haven't actually been saying it outright, which is this is not the most talented roster in the nation. That's Texas. This is not the most talented roster you've had under the Ryan Day era. That's 2019. This is not the most talented roster that you've had when Michigan has been beating you, Okay, that was 2022. This wasn't the best team that Ryan Day's had post-COVID. That was also 2022. And to be honest with you, it was pretty evident after one game that that was the case. So what am I building to here? What is the point that I'm talking about with the quarterbacks wasn't a clear upgrade, and Ryan Day isn't calling plays, and this team isn't better than last year, and it's honestly might be Ohio State's worst team of the Ryan Day era? Okay? What am I building to? This is what I'm building to, this point that I'm making right now. I don't think there was a whole lot that Ryan Day or Chip Kelly could have done different to win this game. You talk about, oh, you're throwing the football or to throw it up to Jeremiah Smith. Okay, first off, Jeremiah Smith was double covered the entire game. And Emeka Egbuka couldn't get open if he was standing in the middle of the Sahara Desert 150 miles away from any population center. Okay? And also, on top of all of that, Will Howard played like shit. Okay, I get that he took the big hit, but he threw an interception before he took the big hit, and he threw an interception after he took the big hit. So I don't blame Ryan Day for not trusting Will Howard to throw the football. I don't blame Ryan Day and Chip Kelly for playing more conservatively and calling more conservative game, because you honestly are the better team than Michigan. And if you make that tackle against Khalil Mullings, it probably goes to overtime and you probably win the game. Because God knows Michigan isn't about to score a touchdown, even if they're at the 25-yard line. Okay? So you just score a touchdown, you win the game in overtime. And the game I want to compare this to is the Rose Bowl between Michigan and Alabama this past year. Jim Harbaugh and Sharon Moore called a relatively conservative game after they tried the one trick play where JJ got blasted by Dallas Turner. After that, it was, okay, we're going to run the football, we're going to maybe score some points, and that's going to be about it. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to lean on the defense. And then, when they had the opportunity to go for two to win the game in regulation, they said, no, fuck that. You want to know why they said that? Because Jim Harbaugh and Sharon Moore and Jesse Minter and every player on the Michigan sideline knew that they were the better team than Alabama. And they were the better team than Alabama. From a coaching perspective, from a decision-making perspective, when you are the coach, I fully understand what was going through Ryan Day's mind and why he was so shocked that they lost the game. Okay? Because with Ryan Day, you can't make the football players make a tackle that are on the field. You can't make Jack Sawyer make a tackle when he got thrown to the ground by Khalil Mullings on that 26-yard run that effectively won Michigan the game. You can't make Will Howard not stare down his receiver so that Makari Page can jump the route. You can't make Will Howard throw the ball late on an outbreaking route so that Amir Hall can jump it and pick it and bring it down to the 1-yard line. You can't make all of the players play mistake-free football. And to be honest with you, was the game plan bad? Yes. Is Chip Kelly in charge of that? Probably also yes. Should Ryan Day have been in the room and helping Chip Kelly game plan and saying, hey, no, we need to throw the football to win this game? Yes. And that is a legitimate criticism of Ryan Day and this football team. But to quote one of my favorite memes, you ain't got the facilities for that, bruv. You don't got the quarterback that can throw the ball in the wind. You don't got the quarterback that can hit a deep play and throw it into a tight window. You don't got that. Now, luckily, we've got this kid Tavier St. Clair coming in, and he's going to start as a true freshman, I think. And I think he's the real deal. I think he's almost as good as Bryce Underwood, as Michigan fans talking about it. He's the consensus number 2 player. He's number 2 on 3 out of the 4 websites. Rivals has his number 1. And Bryce Underwood is number 1 on 3 out of the 4 websites. Rivals has him number 2. So these guys are neck and neck in terms of who is the number 1 quarterback. He's from Ohio. He's going to come in with a team that's wide open next year. We don't really know what this team is going to look like. But all in all, I'm not really sure you can put this loss on Ryan Day's shoulders. Because ultimately, It comes down to the players not doing their job. I mean, Jim Knowles called a run-fit blitz on the Khalil Mullings run that won the game for Michigan. And Jack Sawyer just couldn't make the tackle. Like, I don't know what you would want the coach to do in the situation. He put the kids in a position to succeed, and they didn't capitalize on the opportunities, okay? And as much as people might not want to admit it, the talent gap between these two teams is not nearly as big as everybody is saying it is. It is at the quarterback position because Michigan doesn't have a Division I level starter at the quarterback position. However, you don't exactly have an elite quarterback either. I'm not really sure that you can put this loss on Ryan Day's shoulders. Now, ultimately, he's the head coach. He gets blamed for everything, and he'll take responsibility for that. But I think you've got somebody special coming in at the quarterback position. And as I said in the beginning of this video, in the intro, I said that the night is often darkest right before a new day arises. And I put emphasis on day because I was playing on the fact that, like, the sun rises up and now it's day. And then also Ryan Day. Ryan Day has shown the ability to edit himself. After 2021, he fired the DC. He got a real defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles. And the defense improved overnight. They went from having a piss poor defense that couldn't stop anybody to 3 elite caliber defenses 3 years in a row under Jim Knowles. And yeah, it didn't work because I think he overcorrected. And what I think Ryan Day needs to do now, and what I think Ohio State University needs to do, is force Ryan Day into a Jim Harbaugh arc. And what do I mean by that? Jim Harbaugh, after 2020, had to look in the mirror, and he had to realize, okay, I'm not doing something right. And Ryan Day, I think, is going to have that this weekend, or had that this weekend, rather, because it was the offense that lost them this game. And he is the offense, okay? He's an offensive head coach. The offense is his responsibility. And I think he needs to go back to being a pass-first team that can score points. And is that going to mean that your defense is not elite? Yes, that does mean that. If the offense is elite, the defense can't be elite. The best case scenario is that you have a good defense or an above average defense and an elite offense. That's the best case scenario if you have a truly, genuinely elite offense. And that works in reverse too, by the way, as we've seen the past 2 years at Ohio State. When you have the elite defense, the best case that you can hope for on the offensive end is to be above average or good. And that is the Ohio State offense this year. So all in all, I think what Ohio State should do is, instead of firing Ryan Day, which is very unlikely to happen in my opinion, I think you need to have a very tough conversation with him and be like, hey, motherfucker, you're not worth $10 million right now. We're going to cut your pay in half. You're only making $5 million. And you can make the rest of it back up with incentives. You get $1 million for beating Michigan. You get $1 million for winning the Big Ten. You get $1 million for winning a playoff game. And if you win 4 playoff games, we'll give you $4 million. Because that's what happened with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. They completely shredded his contract after 2020 and signed him to a different deal where he made significantly less money, but still had the opportunity to earn the money he would have earned by winning. That's what I think you need to do. And does that mean that Ryan Day is going to figure shit out? No, not necessarily. But it does mean that his buyout's going to be a hell of a lot less next year. Okay, we're moving on to our final power rankings of the regular season. Actually, we won't be doing the power rankings again, so it's just the final power rankings of this season. Number 1, Oregon. Number 2, Penn State. Number 3, Ohio State. Number 4, Indiana. Number 5, Iowa. Number 6, Illinois. Number 7, Michigan. Number 8, Rutgers. Number 9, Minnesota. Number 10, Washington. 11, Nebraska. 12, USC. 13, MSU. 14, Wisconsin. 15, UCLA. 16, Maryland. 17, Northwestern. 18, Purdue. These are, from 1 to 18, the best to worst teams in the Big Ten, in my opinion, right now. Moving on to my top 15 for the whole country, not just the Big Ten. Next week, Monday, we will react to the college football playoff rankings as they come out Sunday night. But for right now, my top 15 is going to look a hell of a lot different than tomorrow, when the college football playoffs is going to reveal their top 25. Number 1, I have Oregon. Number 2, I have Texas. Number 3, I have Penn State. Number 4, I have Notre Dame. And number 5, I have SMU. Oregon stays the same, and Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, and SMU all move up 1 spot. Boise State up 2 spots to number 6, and Tennessee, yes, jumping ahead of Georgia, up 3 spots to number 7. Georgia does not deserve to be higher than Tennessee right now. Okay? If that Tennessee-Georgia game is played in Knoxville, Tennessee wins. That's just my opinion, but it's also true. 8, Georgia. 9, Ohio State is down from number 2. That is 7-spot fall and a 7-spot drop that they wholly deserved. Number 10, Indiana, they're up 1 spot. That effectively guarantees them a spot in the college football playoffs. Arizona State at 11, BYU at 12, Miami falls 6 spots down to 13. South Carolina is in from being unranked last week at 14. Alabama is down 1 spot, simply because I believe South Carolina has a better resume and deserves to be ranked ahead of them, although I would not say that either of them deserve to be in the playoffs. Not over Miami. I think Miami at 10-2 is a better football team than Alabama and South Carolina at 9-3. But in reality, Alabama will be the 12th seed into the college football playoffs, or the 11th seed, I guess, technically, because they're super low on the Big 12, even though the Big 12 might be a very, very good conference. So I don't really know how to feel about any of that. Obviously, my G5 pick, if it isn't Boise, if they lose in the Mountain West Championship game, it would be Army. Although in reality, if Boise State would lose in the Mountain West Championship game, UNLV would probably jump up to being the 12th seed. But I have Army winning the American, and I also have Army ranked higher than UNLV. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So at this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that is that I'll see you next time.